Hello, and welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy Podcast. Here is a title on the screen. We are at the end of the Phaedo, understanding Socrates' vision of the afterlife, his explanation of what happens when we die, how reincarnation works, what we need to do while we're here, therefore, and what is beyond reincarnation. So, as he said at the end of that description, it might not be literal, but it's something very, very close to this, very like this. And it's worth risking the belief in his description of what happens in reincarnation. But for us, we have to do some work to figure out what the terms may point to in the text, figure out if we can come to some conclusions, and figure out what we should be doing while we're here if this is indeed the case. So how can we benefit from understanding what happens when we die? What happens in reincarnation? That's what we have to do here. Now, of course, if this is the conclusion of the text, thumbs up for us. If this is the conclusion of the text, and one of the puzzles that we have discovered as we go through is the method, or what we're supposed to be doing here, is dianoia. The art of the logos can be expressed in dianoia. Of course, there's more than just dianoia in the art. It would require apprehension of the paradigm. This is the world, the true earth that Socrates has been describing, that where we go when we separate from the body in death, or while we're living in the practice of philosophy. The true practice of philosophy is the practice of dying and being dead, says Socrates. So this allows us to, as the fish in the example, stick our head above the water, catch a glimpse of this realm of being, maybe more than a glimpse, if the instruction is to stay there for as long as we can and practice it. So that's involved in the art. Virtues are involved in the art, doing this at all times, holding on to it at all times, seeking it at all times. Integration of that experience into our dianoia. Dianoia being a kind of understanding of the paradigm, the realm of being, and its parts and its sections, and how it relates to us in our development towards that goal. And of course, recognizing its shadow, how we have a kind of development towards a kind of goal that's negative, that keeps us away, that keeps us imprisoned, chained to our body, and imprisoned in the cycles of reincarnation. So that's the extra level of the metaphor. He's been talking about being chained to the body, and of course, being wrapped up with seeking our physical pleasures, nails our soul to the body. We've talked about separating from the body as if separating from chains. Socrates is in prison with chains that he just took off his legs. He took off from his legs at the start of this conversation, but he's just added the extra element, the idea of not just separating from chains, but separating from prison itself. So we've got two layers. Separating from the chains of the body through our pursuit of dianoia and the art of the logos, and the practicing of it through the virtues. And if we pull it off, if we reach our conclusion, if we master the art of the logos with phronesis, the understanding and experience of the true earth, the realm of being, then we can also free ourselves from the prison. So we've got the chains and the prison being our repeating cycles of reincarnation. So we have to do some work to unpack this, and if this is our task and the central, the keystone, the word mentioned once in the text that might help us to explain how we do all the things mentioned. What are the repeating themes that have come up in the text? Accurately understand with precision. Understand the self ideas. Do so sufficiently. To see the necessity and the beauty and the arguments that sufficiently convince us. To sing away our fears of what's false in this way. To sing an incantation to give our soul wings. How do we do all those things? Well, the word mentioned once that might be a keystone or a key that unlocks this mystery. Dianoia. No, sorry. Dianoia is the whole. It's the understanding of all of this. Dialectic. Wow. Dialectic. Dialectic is the key. Dialectic is the first section of dialectic is self by self. We need to collect ourselves self by self. It's how we organize our thoughts. It's how we organize our ideas. It's how we communicate our ideas. Socrates not only gives us the puzzle to lead to the definition of the dialectic, he demonstrates it. He talks with his friends, outlines the three arguments. Hello, welcome to the chat. Our friend Cebes outlines the fourth argument to show that the soul is immortal and experiencing reincarnation. The fourth argument being, all learning is remembering. After that, Simmias and Cebes had their own religious beliefs that were different. There is no soul. It's kind of a byproduct of the body. It's like harmony, a byproduct of a guitar. So Socrates had to demonstrate the dialectic in conversation to purify themselves of their ignorance. They had learned, but that's not enough. As human beings, we have two tasks: perfection and purification, not just the perfection of our understanding, which is important. We're learning, going from the love of learning, the trust, the risking of the belief and the repeating of it, into understanding, dianoia, what we call philosophy. So the philomathesis, love of learning, to philosophia, and then into the experience, the verification of our understanding, indirect experience with our understanding so we can make sense of it, with the practice and nurture, doing this at all times so we can integrate it. What's that called? Phronesis. So those are the three levels of perfection. Philomathesis, true love of learning; philosophia, the love of dianoia really; and philophronesis. Of course, those two levels, dianoia understanding and nous knowledge, not offered in our mainstream, not offered in schools, not even offered in philosophy classes. We as a culture are still at the level of opinion. And one of the expressions through the text is we want to go beyond opinion to the unopinable, that which isn't even grasped with the cognitive aspect of opinion, higher cognitive, the higher sense of our mind, the higher ways that we can think. So that would be the perfection. But that's not enough, because if we have false beliefs, maybe even unsuspected false beliefs that we don't know we're clinging to, defending, living out, then they will get in the way and block us. And that's what happened to Simmias and Cebes. That's what happens to all of us because we are human beings. Necessarily, as part of the game, we develop a false beliefs about self, reality, and the logos to survive our upbringing. And as Socrates says, before we learnt the art of the logos, it's not that the self, reality, or the logos, the understandable nature of reality, is bad. It's that we have not yet learnt the art of the logos. This is a condition of the soul, the greatest defect of the soul, says Socrates, that we have to be on guard against. Let's check in with the chat. So that's the perfection, but being humans, we have to purify ourselves from those unsuspected false beliefs that bind us to chains or prison, or what are those things metaphors for? Fate. Repeating cycles of failure in this life with our problems, but also, as Socrates is pointing out, yeah, you know what? Also between lives. Repeating cycles of reincarnation, just like repeating cycles of problems in our lives. As above, so below. If it's a principle that is understandable, then it has to apply to all. If it's a paradigmatic principle, if it's a model, if it's the paradigm. So, if we can understand our reincarnation, we can understand, therefore, how we play that out in our everyday world. And maybe apply that to escape the chains and the prison of both. So, this is Socrates demonstrating it in the perfection, giving the arguments that we ourselves can not just trust, but apply ourselves to understand. Find the dialectical structure in his arguments. There's only 4 parts to the dialectic. 2 sections, if it is and if it isn't. If you want to do more work, you can make the 4 into 12. Because, let's draw it up. Because the 4 parts of the dialectic, so whatever we're interested in learning, like the soul, you can say you can say self to self, or its definition. Okay, so we can also say how it functions, or its demonstration. We can talk about how those things that have been affected by its functioning relate to others. So these others being affected, how they relate to other others. That's division. And then how those others, after going through all of that activity, process, dianoia, incarnation, life experience, how they relate back to the start. And we call that synthesis, because these divisions, these experiences, these ideas, whatever is divided up into its different categories, expressing this demonstration of this division, they have to be unified together, that synthesis, and then that is then applied back to the original thing to understand it better. Analysis. Synthesis, analysis. And of course, we say that for side A. If the soul is, which means exists. Of course, one of our dialectics should be on what does exists mean, Or what does being mean? We're interested in the realm of being. And then we have to do it for side B, same ones inside B. If, it's always if. It's a hypothesis, it's a level of trust. If, in the physical world, because this is not the realm of being where we can know. So if the soul, or whatever the subject is, if it is, these are the 4 categories. What can you say about it? How would you define it? How does it function towards something else? You can pick what's the other thing you want to talk about it in relation to. How does the soul relate to us? How does the soul relate to being? How does the soul relate to beauty? You pick. Just like if you were to explain a bike to someone who doesn't know what a bike is, you probably define it and then talk about how it functions in relation to you. It helps me get to the store. It helps me save time instead of walking to school. It takes me to places. Okay, but then me with the bike now can do other things. Division. I can join the BMX club. I can do wheelies and impress girls. I can give my friend a double to the store to get ice creams together. Division. And then, of course, both me and my friends would relate back to the bike. I have to look after the bike. I have to change the tires or put air in the tires. My friend will say, "Wow, I love your bike. You are cool." So relating back to the bike. Now, if it doesn't exist, we have to do that as well. If it doesn't exist. If not exist. So this is the dialectic. Let's check in with chat. Through mind, right, dianoia, is an action already done in the process. Reach, complete. So a complete action both being started and finishing in the process of dianoia. Through or across space or a concept encompassing the all. Diados. So we're looking at the etymology of dianoia in the chat. Either a process or a completed action is the idea here. Or through. Interesting. So you could unpack that in different ways. So for each of these, however, 4 parts, you can unpack it and make it 12. For each of these, you could say what's true about it. What can you say about it? What's false? What would you never say about it? And what's both? Both is fun. So you have to be a little bit creative with both. Both true and false. Dialogue. Interesting. Diados, dianoia, dialogue. What's diados? Dialogue, we can view the whole or parts as one. Right? That's what we're doing here. So, for example, definition. What can you say that's true about the bike? It has handlebars. What's false about it? You would never say it is, what could you never say about a bike? That it's, I was going to say that it's not to be used, but I'm using not, which is kind of cheating. If it's not, then I'm really saying it is to be used. I put it in this category. But what's false about it? It's goodness, what's not true about a bike? It's stationary. Stationary, maybe. Or it's only for the elites. I don't know. What would you not say about a bike? And what's both true and false in terms of definition? So what's true about it has wheels. What's false about it? It has only one part. What's both true and false about a bike? It's, well, I guess it's propelled. And then you'd have to give it a little explanation or demonstration about why it's both true and false. It's true in that it is propelled, but it's false in that it's not self-propelled. You have to sit on the bike and circle your legs around. So it's both true and false that it's self-propelled. Yeah, self-propelled. Which is interesting because self-moving is one of the aspects of soul. So literally, definition of the soul, you can say, you know, what we're learning about the soul. Maybe it's immortal. What's false about it? It dissipates into the air when we die. It dissipates. This is the fear that Seebe's had, is cultural or religious fear. No. Simius, I think, had this one. Dissipates into the air. What's true and false is it's self-moving. And you could say, well, it's true in the sense that in its nature it is self-moving, but it's false by in the sense that if you have a unsuspected false belief we call a pathologos, the self-moving nature of your soul will be limited. And that's called being chained to fate. Just like the chains that keep a prisoner, including Socrates in his prison cell. But also, chained to fate in this life, you will repeatedly play out the same kinds of problems in your relationships, in your job, in everything that you do. It can be difficult to see your own, which is why we talk with our friends, but easier to see in others. And on the higher level, Socrates is saying, in prison keeps you not only chained to fate in this world, keeps you imprisoned into the cycles of reincarnation, which might not go well because there is a possibility of getting stuck in Tartarus. If we don't do our work, we might cycle downward and get stuck in Tartarus. So this is both true and false. So you can simply use 4 categories to talk about something, or you can break it down into 12 and have more fun, especially with that true and false one. Okay, but as we were just saying, this isn't just a one-person game. We share our thoughts with others. We have coffee with friends. Our fate or our problems are difficult to see for ourselves, so we have to talk about it. So we can apply the same dialectic to conversation. So what we're doing now is defining the dialectic, but we also have to demonstrate it. So you can say what we are doing, our learning is the dialectic. Not just learning the dialectic as a definition, but dialecting the dialectic. So there's another dia word for you in chat. Can a thing be self-moving if one can't move? Yes. Yes, but that answer is not going to be a good answer for you, because the real question is why. Or is it that the one can't move, or is it that the one is beyond movement and the cause of movement? This is an interesting thing when we get into studying the one. Socrates was talking, how did he get into this? How did Socrates get into this? Because there ain't no one talking about it in his time, just as there ain't no one talking about it in our time. Or rather, I found one person talking about it, but he's no longer with us, just as Socrates is no longer with us here. So we have to figure this out together. So how did Socrates do it? This is one of the last things that he talked about. He had to search for causes. So if there are moving things in or motion in our physical world, or what we call the world of becoming, because everything is becoming, it's in change. What is the cause of it? There must be a principle, something that creates and sustains motion. Maybe metal is in a state of ousia. Interesting. It would be a quality of ousia, and maybe not the highest if it doesn't have mind. Because there are levels to ousia. Like right now, we are ousiaing. We are reflecting on ourselves. We're reflecting on our life. We're reflecting on the text. That's ousia. But what's interesting is, if we learn how to do it well, the dialectic, it can awaken the experience of ousia. So the same kind of thing, ousia, but so this is a reflection on ourselves through understanding, the highest kind of ousia we can do in our physical world of becoming. But if there is something in the, my handwriting today is, okay. If there is something in the physical world of becoming, there has to be a cause for it in the realm of being, for it to have the scope over the physical world. Because hey, things in motion are not just in motion over here, they're everywhere, for always in the physical world. So this principle has to be the kinds of definitions we give to being: immortal, powerful, effective, and so on. So this was what Socrates said got him into real learning, actual learning, philomathesis, love of learning, and what awakened philosophy, love of wisdom, because wisdom is our understanding directed towards being. So another word for philosophy could be philodianoia. Now, of course, if there is motion itself, or we call it self-motion, because it has a kind of selfhood in being. So the word self also means the honorific, not the example of motion as an adjective, but the noun. Socrates said, hey, that got me into philosophy, but that's not the end. You have to go beyond this, because if there are a bunch of causes, there must be a cause of even causes, or the conditions for causes. So we are talking about, another example could be ousia. We are doing ousia in our physical world. The best kind of ousia we can do while in a physical form. And that's what Socrates is describing is our purpose here. To separate from our physical senses because our physical senses can't do this. So there might be a kind of ousia in metal or our physical senses. So in chat talking about metal, that keeps the metal together, keeps our physical shape together, sure. But a higher level of ousia is our mind, or rather our soul, our psyche. So soul is kind of what allows the connection between mind and body. Metal. So the reason why metal can't do this is no soul there. At least not at the level of mind. Another way you can say, well, of course, for it to keep itself together, it has to have some aspect or reflection of mind, sure. But when we have a soul, we have a connection. It brings in mind and life. It animates us. It allows us to have self-motion. We can move ourselves. I can decide what happens to my hand. A metal rod can't do that. So one of the definitions of soul could be self-motion. Just as this reflection on ourselves, separated from our physical senses as much as we can, separated from our physical desires and pleasures and fears and pains as much as we can as a human being, into the level of ideas is the highest kind of ousia we can do in the physical world. But what's curious about that is if we learn the dialectic, we can ousia our best. As Socrates had said last time, do our best to, let's see it in the text, no, just trust me. Do our best to participate, go through the details, necessity, part of the dialectic, our conclusions, it necessarily has to follow. Participating in excellence. So we don't just want to understand, we want to do so with excellence, in detail. If we do that, we will reach phronesis, and the prize in our incarnations will be beautiful, and the hope is great. Risk this belief. Do it. Risk it, says Socrates. So if we participate in our ousia, self-reflection and dianoia understanding with excellence, we're learning this. And if we participate in ousia with excellence, we can awaken the divine self. Let's get the quote that we have. I've got a quote for this. Okay, here's a quote. So the ousia of selves, so we're using our ousia of reflection to reflect on the selves, which are ousia themselves, motion itself, beauty itself, justice itself. That's accurate dianoia. If we do that dianoia accurately, we will get close. The closer. But where is the divine self? Okay, here's another quote from earlier in the text. Here we go, this one here. So practice philosophy in the right way. We're always eager, so we're always doing this. This is the virtue part of it, the nurture part of it. Both of these go together for phronesis. And what else is needed for phronesis? That ousia that we're doing here on the board, under the quote, applied to the ousia of selves and being, with excellence, the dialectic, allows us to awaken true ousia. If while we live, we will be closest to knowing when we don't associate with the body or commune with it more than necessary, purify ourselves until the divine self shall liberate us. Liberated of the phronesis of the body, then we'll know what is pure. That's the truth. So this idea of the divine self. What is the divine self? Well, if we've been doing a dialectic, if we can do a dialectic on being, we can say things like, what's the definition of being? Self itself. Self itself. It's immortal. It's deathless. It's divine. Okay, how does it demonstrate? And we can keep going on. So if the divine self is the self in being, what's liberating us if we practice the dialectic, doing ousia on ousia with excellence? Self-ousia. The divine self is self-ousia. It's ousia, mind. The self-ousia, the honorific ousia, the ousia in being. So, levels. There are levels in reality. This is the ousia of our physical world. We do so with the dialectic. That's a level of excellence that will awaken the ousia of the realm of being, liberating us from the body. Hopefully we've been practicing, not indulging or engaging or communing with physical body and physical pleasures and pains as much as we can. So this is ousia itself. And of course, one of the qualities of ousia is self-motion. So the soul, or one of the qualities of the soul is self-motion, giving us physical motion. So too, self-ousia is the cause for this dianoia, ousia in our physical world through understanding. But now the question in the chat was, well, hang on a second. If motion is caused by self-motion, how can self-motion exist if the one, which is beyond being, the condition or cause of being, I thought this was static. This is the first hypothesis of Parmenides. We've got a series on that. You can find it on YouTube. You can watch it for free. Where we find out actually, it's not that it doesn't have motion. That's a misunderstanding. Usually taught to us by people who haven't read the first hypothesis of the Parmenides or haven't read the translation that's only been around for 5 or so years with the actual words. Because it's full of puzzles, and one of those puzzles is this one. It's not the rejection of motion, it's the cause of motion. So if it's the cause, it can't itself be in motion, but beyond. So it's a good question. That question in chat should take you to that past series on the first hypothesis. Take that question with you. Okay. Is the universe just a question with no answer? It can be a funny joke. Right, so again, Socrates is saying it's intelligible. It has an answer, and the answers have levels, just as reality has levels. We start with learning, philomathesis, which is what he is saying, risk the trust. He's saying here, it is proper and worthy to risk the belief that it has to be in this way. This risk is a noble one, that this is the case, or something like this is the case, is certainly the case about our souls and its habitation. The soul is evidently immortal. We've gone through it, we've seen it, we've understood it already, the immortal part, and necessarily benefiting to sing myths to themselves as if it were an incarnation. This is what it means to be brave and to be of good cheer. If you do this and ignore the pleasures of the body or the adornments of the body, fashion, and instead seriously concern yourself with this, the pleasure of this, love of learning, and adorn your soul not with things that are alien to yourself like fashion, but the virtues, sound-mindedness, seeking dianoia, righteousness, using dianoia, virility, being brave and of good cheer, freedom that happens when you get into this, and truth when you can experience it. In this way, await your journey into the next world. Self-ousia, when you are this, you will be prepared to go when your allotted destiny summons, either when the divine self invites you in this life, self-ousia, or after you die. So we risk this belief. This is what it means to be courageous. Whoops. So levels of intelligibility, levels of answering questions. Trust. Gotta start somewhere. But then how do we go? We can't stay in trust, of course, even though we're being told we have to risk this belief. This is the next stage. This is needed. Dianoia through the dialectic. And of course, even then, this is a kind of purification until we can experience it. Self-ousia. The mind can turn around and experience itself and connect with itself fully. Mirroring this, the way our definition functions, unfolds, and then creates, unfolds even further into division, and then unifies in synthesis, and then comes back around the start to bring it all together. But all together through the logos, through these parts, means that when you come back to the start with this. You have learned, you have purified and perfected yourself. So the question is, well, what's the cause of that? Well, this whole thing has a cause in self-ousia, and we are doing a kind of reflection of that in our learning here in dianoia, true philosophy. But the goal is to awaken self-ousia, where you can actually have mind minding mind. But then what's the cause of that? If it's the cause of mind, it can't be mind. If it's cause of the greatest experience, it can't be an experience. If it's the cause of complete knowledge or nous, can't be knowledge or nous. What is it then? That's the question of the first hypothesis of Parmenides. It's a good one. Logos is like a universal blueprint. True. Right. So if ousia functions in this way, then within self-ousia, the existence of being, logos better be high up on the list to create the principle of self-ousia that can reflect. That's right. So even the logos, the path, understanding, dialectic, the structure, the terms, the logos, that which makes everything understandable has to have its own ousia. Right, container, inside and outside a container is another section of the first hypothesis. Learning is to spot patterns, like two beautiful bodies. Then there is a thing that is like, similar, equal. Right. So we see examples looking for patterns. And then if there is a pattern, there have to be something like all of them. And then you can ask the question, right, and then you can compare them, greater and lesser. Some things are more or less beautiful, more or less equal, more or less in self-motion, more or less free. And then you want to ask, what's the cause of it? Okay, so that's what we're doing here. If this is the structure of the dialectic, can we see this pattern in the text? Did Socrates define philosophy, define the dialectic, or give us what we need to define the dialectic? Did he demonstrate it in the 4 arguments for the immortality and of the soul and reincarnation. And also, not just demonstrate what it is, but what it isn't. Did he demonstrate the dialectic? Or did he define what philosophy isn't as well? The anti-logos, people who like to shut down arguments, think that's what makes them clever. Debate bros. People who are love of fighting, philonikos. Again, debate bros. People who are lovers of the body and seek fame or riches. These are all if philosophy didn't exist. A definition. So these people, a lot of them call themselves philosophers, life coaches, red pill podcasts, influencers, culture warriors, all that crap. Okay? Did he demonstrate it for what it is, what the soul is, but also did he help by purifying Simius and Cebes from their cultural and religious beliefs of what the soul isn't? They were taught that the soul doesn't exist. That is kind of a byproduct of our physical body, or maybe it exists, but it doesn't exist immortally. So the word exists means eternally, immortally, in being. It doesn't mean has a physical reflection. It's not what exists means. Yeah, he did. He addressed their false beliefs and benefited them and healed them. So it's kind of an art. So here's our purifications. So we can use the exact same art, the art of the dialectic, to perfect our understanding and purify our ignorance. What does that give us when we have been purified? As Socrates says, sing the song that will sing away our childish from childhood fears of death, like singing away the fear of the boogeyman. Purification. What does that give us? Freedom. And power. Wow. Virility, power. We need power to do this. Okay, this is what we said. We need to adorn ourselves with sound-mindedness, seeking this at all times. Righteousness, functioning with it. Justice. The power that comes from this, the freedom that comes from the purification, applying the dialectic to what's not true, and the truth. Understanding and knowing. So the perfection side A, but also the knowing of truth. Ousia. Spot patterns. Love, without it, nothing comes together. And to see yourself in something, you can't reject it. 2 loves and has a sense of separation. Love is a tricky word, so you'd have to. So that's 1. If love exists, how would you define it? So take this idea of love, because everyone has a different idea of love, right? In the Middle Ages, Christians thought it was loving to murder non-believers. It would save their souls, or torture them until they rejected their beliefs and accepted Jesus. That's love for them, apparently. Some people think tough love, beating or punishment, is love, which is, of course, we've seen through the logos that that's objectively false and unjust. And ignorance that we would hopefully walk them through the arguments so they can be purified from. That was the soul. If the soul brings in ousia and self-motion, just as 3 brings in oddness, 3 doesn't have an opposite, but oddness has an opposite, evenness. So if you bring in the idea of even, not only will odd run away or be destroyed, because odd and even can't coexist, so too 3. If you bring in even, you can't have 3. It withdraws or is destroyed. So this principle, the thing that comes with the idea also can't sustain the opposite. So if learning, so we can use that. So this is the importance of, this is the importance of understanding. We can make it ours and we can use it as an art. If learning is something good, or brings in the good, or is a reminder of the good, reminds us of the good, introducing the opposite, bad, punishment or violence, tough love, then not only does the good withdraw, you're no longer happy when you're being punished, you're no longer happy about yourself, but you are not learning. So the very thing that justifies violence in the human world currently at our stage of evolution, some violence is good because it helps people learn. It makes them better. We can say, well, actually, that's a false belief, because this is the argument. Learning or goodness, because learning brings in goodness, just like 3 brings in oddness, both are destroyed. So we cannot justify violence. Now, we'd also have to look at what is the cause for this false belief, because we don't just perfect our understanding, we also have to apply the dialectic to why it's cause of what doesn't exist, or why did we learn that violence was okay? Violence was good. It teaches you a lesson, tough love, and all that. And then we can look at the causes for that. The cultural and societal causes, which is important because in a just world, we would therefore address those. Oh, if we have schools that punish people and think that's what helps them learn math, then we are creating the conditions or causes for this harmful, tyrannical, false, unjust belief that causes harmful, tyrannical, unjust actions. And also tyranny. In order for a small group to oppress a large group, they need violence. In order for that to happen, they need ignorant foot soldiers to inflict the violence on their family and friends. In order to justify that, we have to teach that violence somehow brings in goodness, teaches you a lesson, tough love, all that crap. So in other words, we can say, oh, maybe the cause for this false belief being in institutions is some person who wanted to be a tyrant. What's the cause for that? Now we can go into our evolution. In cave, good. Outside cave, bad, scary. If you've ever listened to the Republicans or the right-wingers in the American stage show that is politics, they always appeal to this part of our evolution. The left are bad and scary. The browns are scary. The things that are other than your family cave, outside the cave, bad and scary. It's no understanding, no dianoia, no art, no benefit. It's all fear of what's different, which allows for tyranny. Those people they convince with this different than you is bad and scary distracts from learning, distracts from our evolution, but also gets that small amount of people to not learn the dialectic, so those people can be manipulated to act against their own benefit. Right? These are very rich, powerful, abusive people who are exploiting these people who are saying, yay, we want you to be our leader of the cave because of how unjust you look. Hang on a second. Doesn't appear unjust because they need to apply the dialectic to why the bad looks good. We all do what we think is good. So the problem isn't that the people being manipulated by fascists are evil, they have ignorance. They seek the good. We have to look at the conditions for them learning that what is bad is good. So it all comes down to this, always the dialectic. So we're talking about love in chat. If you've got some ideas about love, fantastic. But seeing as there are so many different ideas of love, love is to have faith. Hang on a second, Socrates says that's the worst thing. No. Don't have faith. That's the worst thing. That's absurd. Literally, one of the definitions for faith is an absurd belief. Why? Because normally beliefs are based on reason and evidence. If someone comes along and says, I'm going to tell you something against reason, against evidence, but you have to believe it because that's what we do in this cave, it shows your loyalty to the cave. So it's a preying on our evolutionary causes as human beings. By definition, that's an absurd belief. Now, you could even go one step further and say, well, actually, often they're against reason and evidence. So not just not provable, but in opposition to. So it's an not just absurd, but objectively false beliefs. So Socrates said we have to instead go from that to a kind of trust in the logos, a kind of belief we do risk, the repeating of what we're learning in the Phaedo. We've got reasons for trusting it. Socrates has defined it. He can demonstrate it. He can divide it into its elements, applying it to society, applying it to the world, applying it to our political system, applying it to people who claim to be experts, applying it to our incarnations, and so on and so on and so on. Division. But then, of course, anybody, he says, you can't stay at trust because then you'll be manipulated. You'll end up hating people or hating reason itself. So anybody who says you just stay below the level of understanding is conning you. They are ignorant, claiming to be not ignorant. So make sure that whoever you are learning from, ideally Socrates, they are encouraging you to go to dianoia, which is the best kind of ousia we can do, the most accurately. That's what we're learning here. Right. I'm trying to get rid of people think X about you if you do Y. So listening to the echo in my mind, contemplating an image appeared, an authority figure. Right. So yeah, so in chat, we're looking at things that we can, through logos, through reasoned reflection, can recognize are absurd or false. But then we have to, that doesn't free us from it. We have to look at why it was believable. And like an image will come to mind often, a state of mind. So we can apply this dialectic to that. Definition of the false belief or the feeling. How does it demonstrate? Demonstrates as a feeling or state of mind. How does that state of mind divide through your life? Are there other times where you felt this thing that you have defined as false? Or the definition could be the false belief itself. I am bad because X. Okay, so we can, and then we can find of the divisions, you find that which is most causal, which can be the most primary in metaphysics. What was the first time you've had that state of mind, that demonstration? And then this you can, synthesis is picking out the causal definition and then analyzing it, applying it back to the definition. This voice that says this is the same thing I heard when I was 4 and I wanted to blah, blah, blah. And then of course you continue. You take that early scene and then you define it and then you demonstrate it in division and so on. This is the application of the dialectic to what's not true, to purify ourselves from the very ignorance we're talking about right now. Sometimes it's called, as Socrates calls it, philosophical midwifery. Because Socrates' mum was a midwife, and Socrates says in the same way she can help people give birth to babies, I can help people give birth to ideas and judge them that are sick and can't survive and shouldn't survive. Yes, trust. So it's the opposite kind of trust, to trust in the unsuspected false beliefs. But we can use this ousia because then art can recognize what's healthy and what's sick. Right. So we apply the dialectic to both. So I suggest pick out love. We've seen many different definitions of love. So it'd be a good exercise, because if love is something that exists, use it to practice your dianoia, the art that we're here to do. Now, where do we get these terms from? Do we want mum's definition of love? Do we want the religious definition of love? Do we want dad's definition of love? Whatever that was? Of course not. We want to purify ourselves from the ignorant ones. We therefore have to look to the text. This is why we're reading. Socrates has defined the nature of being and the soul and incarnation and the meaning of life. He's demonstrated this as well. He has experienced it. He has integrated it. He can use it in these conversations. He's using the dialectic in these conversations. He can break it down through the text to give us puzzles that we can solve. The solving is the synthesis analysis. So he's functioning on many, many levels, and that's why we look to the text. We have reason to trust he has a mastery of the art of the logos, the dianoia and dialectic. So that's why if we're going to define love, make sure we're getting it from the text. And that's what we have been doing. So in the similar way to in chat, we're talking about looking for key terms, looking for patterns to discover our problems. So of course, you're not going to do it if you're not seeking excellence. So seek excellence, seek your highest goal. As you pursue it, you'll notice key terms, key words, key states of mind, key dramas. Maybe a certain person keeps showing up to stop you. Then you can organize your reflections in the dialectic that can purify yourself from your problems or escape the chains of fate. Now, if you don't, you're going to be imprisoned in the cycle of reincarnation. If you don't escape from fate, then you will nurture your soul in a certain way that will cause your incarnations. So you have two levels, the chains of fate and the imprisonment in our cyclical reincarnations and the punishments and the sufferings and the ignorance and the fears and all the crap that happens with the back and forth of cycles of reincarnation. Back into the body again, forget it all again, have to go through it all again, maybe as a donkey and a bee for a while. So it's negative, ultimately, until we learn the art of the dialectic. Okay, so in the same time we can do that for our problems, so too we do it to the text. Because the purification is what we are carrying that's false. The perfection is what we get from the text. So it has to be change-arranged. Yes, it has to be change-arranged. To change what we hold on to as true, because that affords us a freedom to get into the text and see the text without distractions. That voice no longer comes up to say you can't read, or you should be doing something practical, you should be getting nice clothes or lots of money or lots of women's. So it doesn't distract us from our reading. So that gives us a freedom. But what are you going to use that freedom for? To play basketball super good? Boo. You use that freedom from your problems to do the exact same thing you did to escape your problems, but to the text. Because Socrates has gone through it. That's why he's here. That's why we read. That's why he's unique. That's why he's the father of Western thought. That's why they say everything since Socrates has been a footnote. That's why we haven't been able to do it, because we've only now got the text translated in our hands. Like only in, the last 100 years have we been able to have this text in our hands. And only in the last 5 years have we had the actual translation properly. So we've only now got it, but we can get it. So good for us. We can do it. We can purify ourselves from the problems, use that freedom from our problems to perfect ourselves in our mastery of the dialectic, to find what's actually true about the self, actually true about our mind and our soul, actually true about the logos and the meaning of life, and actually do it. So we are living out a dialectic, whether we like it or not. Why? Because the dialectic is the cause of everything. It's the understandability. It's for there to be a reflection from the first cause into the set of causes in being, and then into our reflection in our physical world. This is a pattern of reflection. What's the understanding of the pattern of reflection? This. It has to be maybe there's a fifth above, a condition that is defined in its ultimate, then has to function to create the physical world. And in the physical world, there has to be divisions, and not just what is, but also we have to have a problem. So we play out the divisions of what happens if we don't know the truth. And then there also has to be, in our physical world, a way of bringing it all together in our mastery of the pattern, and then analyzing the original cause to turn us all around and complete our work. Otherwise, it would be an irrational or unjust reality, which it's not. Demonstrably so. And Socrates says, trust it. And the worst condition is to think that it isn't understandable or just. Be on guard. The people who claim to be philosophers after Socrates who don't have the art their qualification is to reject it. That's why he calls them anti-logos. They'll say, oh no, there is no understandability, so I can be an expert without having learned crap. I'm a doctor without having to go to medical school, because there is no medicine, so it's just whatever you want. Like, throw a stone at people who teach philosophy at college and they'll say it. Well, that will be the underlying assumption. Or podcasts, or self-help, or life coaching gurus, or red pill podcasts, whatever. Socrates said, hey, if they don't have the art of the logos, their qualification will be that they'll reject it. They're good at debating or shutting down arguments. Anti-logos, he calls it. But we have to be on guard, because if we are conned by them, we'll end up hating the logos or reality. Or if we once believed Socrates and then they convinced us by pushing our evolution buttons or our cultural buttons, then we'll go, oh, maybe I suck too, because I believe Socrates, but now I think there's other things, so maybe I'm a bad judge. I'll hate myself, I'll hate reality, I'll hate the logos. We have to be on guard for that. That's the essence of our false beliefs. Just as Socrates defined philosophy, demonstrated it with the 4 arguments for the immortality of the soul and reincarnation, but then Simmias and Cebes jumped in here. They used the cultural and religious beliefs that felt true, seemed probable, felt attractive, and then all of a sudden they ended up hating themselves. Oh my God, I suck. I judged Socrates as being right, but now obviously he's wrong, because this religious stuff sounds true to me, because that's how I grew up. So I'm a bad judge. Yeah. That's what, if you ever been to church, you can't know God. You're not as good as God. You can't judge. How dare you judge the works of gods? He works in mysterious ways. You can't judge. Socrates predicted this 2,500 years ago, but we can, because if you know the model, you know its differences. If the model is, yes, you are the judge, you have to be, otherwise, what the hell are we doing here? And by the way, your ultimate self might even be the cause of mind. So whatever God is in the realm of being, the immortal and the divine and the eternal, the self is even beyond that. So all this "you're not as good as God" crap, it's the opposite. Which is interesting, because you have to convince people to believe in whatever God you're selling. You don't have to convince people they have a self. Do you? Do you have a self? Do I need to convince you that you have a self? All right. So, you are good. Reality is just and understandable. And the logos is inaccessible through dianoia. So if they reject understanding, then there's no metric. Then any dumb opinion they're tricking you to believe can be true. But as soon as we say, oh, actually, no, it doesn't apply to anywhere else, by the way. Medicine. Oh yeah, there is no actual understanding of medicine, so I can just say whatever. Actually, no, there is an understanding. That's why we have medical schools. They have to reject understanding, number one, logos. Or they'll say, oh no, actually, we live in a world. The reality itself is ununderstandable. Nobody knows what the realm of being is. Nobody's died and come back to tell us about it. There's been no out-of-body experiences. Bollocks. Of course we know that's not true. That's nous, by the way. That's reality. That's being. That's where the causes that we are interested in. And finally, what's the cause of causes? The self. Oh, no, you're not as good as God. You can never know God. Maybe there is a noble reality. Maybe there is an understanding, but you can't know it because you suck. So of course it's the opposite. So, nice, taking walks, challenging yourself to act in a different way can surface what you need to apply this to. And whether you're applying it to your problems or applying it to the text, either way, you are perfecting what we're here to do. Yes. Yes. Apply the dialectic. Can you hear the negative self-talk? How does it function? How does it make you feel? How does it affect yourself in other areas, in your work, in your relationships, in your play, in your reading? So whatever you have, use it to do what we're here for, the dialectic. Says Socrates. Be seriously concerned with the love of learning. If this is the love of learning, if this is the self-practice of philosophy, let's find it in the text. Exercise. Here we go. So if it's the dianoia that one purifies self by self, and if it's the dianoia upon ousias, and the accurate understanding or the accurate dianoia that allows us to approach the real beings, that is the, and here's the opposite, interested in the body. That is this purification through this dianoia accurately gathers your soul out of the body, accustoms yourself to do it. While you're out of the body, you are collecting self by self. What's that sound like? Self by self. It's called death, by the way. And it's the self-study of philosophers. You're doing philosophy correctly. And right at the end, it's right at the start, that's in his doctrine, his definition, but at the end, he's bringing it all together. That's what we should be doing. That's our preparation. Ignore the other pleasures and can seriously concern yourself to this study. Right. And by the way, you have to do both. Like, you have to be... How do you recognize a problem if all you know is that world? You also, that's why one of the other reasons we're in the text. Not just to learn the method of what we're here to do, the meaning of life, our purpose, but he is giving us a definition of what's true about being, about the self, about our physical world, so that we can recognize the deviations. If all you know is that you suck, because that's all you've been told by your family and your church and your teachers or whoever, your girlfriends, then how will you know it's not true and a problem? If you grow up fundamentalist, whatever, with that political affiliation, how will you know that what you're being told are cons and lies? That's why we have to be in the text. To surface, seek mastery of the text with excellence. What's the first stage? Believe it. Risk the belief. Trust it. And repeat it. Talk about it. All the time. What's the next stage? Take the parts, structure it in this way. That's dianoia. That's accurately understanding. Using materials only from the text. Only from the text. Or conclusions that you have arrived from the text, like the dialectic, for example. We did have the word dialectic in the text, and it is a hypothesis that solves questions, so we can bring with us our understanding, but it's from the text. So this will surface what's not true. And how do you address what's not true? You have to challenge it with what is true. By the way, I can't be that I suck because I'm the cause of even God. Because God has to have a cause. If God is self-ousia, that which is mind that is eternal immortal, that is the cause of motion, then that has to have a cause. So you have to challenge your false beliefs, but also you have to learn how to challenge it properly. That's the art of the logos, just like medicine. You have to learn what's healthy and surface what's sick. The same art approaches both, says Socrates in the Phaedo. Okay, so if this is the case, and I recommend it to all of the ideas that have come up in chat, I recommend you to try it. If an idea has come up, hey, that's a gift. It's an opportunity to practice these 4 steps. Or 8, including what's not. And for these 4, you can even practice even more, cut it up into 3 more, make it 12. So 24 in total, if you like. Do whatever you can until the block comes up and says, nah, do something different. All right, I only got through the 4 in side A. I didn't get to side B. Okay. Come back to it later. Maybe look at what took you away from it. That's an opportunity to purify yourself. Come back and go more, because we seek excellence. That's being in the game. That's being an adventurer.
You're a wizard, Harry.
All right, so purification, perfection. But so Socrates defined this, demonstrated both what it is and what it isn't, or defined what philosophy is and what it isn't. demonstrated it in his use of the dialectic for the 4 arguments if it is, and addressing the 2 that wasn't. But also he's divided it up through the whole conversation. It's giving us bits and pieces we can piece together to get puzzles, to get questions. Which means we should be able to see if the whole text follows the structure of the dialectic. Was the first thing his doctrine, was that a definition? Were the arguments demonstration? What was the division? Was this description of how it affects our reincarnation one of the divisions? If so, then we have to do the last step. Take that last division, take this division stage, or the last one of them, the explanation of the true earth that we have been pointing to with our definition, referring to in our demonstrations, but he's literally talking about it with its Tartarus, with its Oceanus, with its Archaean River and its Archaean Arcus River and its Arcusian marshlands, and then the other 2 ones that go along, the Phlegeton River of Fire, and the Cocytus, oh my goodness, Periphlegython. It's a real mouthful. Cocytus. Okay, I was gonna say the river Coxsucus, but it's not. It's Cocytus. My mnemonic device failed me. Risk the belief that this is the truth, or something like it is the case. But also, if it's like it, each of those terms should be a metaphor for something in the text to unlock something significant about our purpose, the nature of reality, why we're here, and ultimately, not just the nature of our soul and reincarnation, not just the nature of the realm of pure being. What he's talking about, hey, you can escape the cycles of going through those rivers to live on the true surface of the earth, just like a fish who sticks his head above the water and realizes that there are us guys here that didn't even know. Gave us that metaphor. But also, hey, Socrates told us, he said, look, I am going to describe how I got into this, just like you guys 2,500 years later. There won't be anyone talking about it, but you have to get into it somehow. This is how you do it. Search for causes. Realize that it's not your physical causes that cause you to do things. Your mind decides. So there's a level of mind. It has to judge what's good or beautiful. So all of these things, it has to have self-motion. It has to reflect on itself. These are all things in mind. You have to reflect on yourself to make a decision. Self-usia. You have to have some sort of power or motion, self-motion. You judge it upon what's good, self-good. You have to judge what's more just or beautiful to do. All of these things are terms that you can use for a dialectic. All of those causes in your second search for causes, as Socrates talked about his own experience of, are subjects for the dialectic. When I did the dialectic on potential to be hit by lightning. Right, so that's important. The dialectic has to be on these things. I mean, you can start by doing one on physical things like a bike or a hammock. But that's to understand the structure. You've got to apply it to the self terms. So we had that quote earlier. Let's bring it up again. Self-justice, self-beauty, the self-good, the ousia of the beings is when we understand them most accurately. So these are the terms. But of course, so Socrates is talking about the physical to say separate from the physical. Separate from the physical. So, excuse me. And even you could even say, well, actually, he's talking about our soul, how we live, affecting where we go in the next world, and the river Tartarus, the Arcasian marshlands, and the river leading to that, the river Styx, leading into the fiery marshlands that becomes the Peri-Phrygian river down to Tartarus, and the other one that goes around the river Styx, leading into the Styxian marshlands that becomes the Cocytus river that goes to Tartarus, which is the one that goes through the middle. And there's this Oceanus one that goes around the outside, and there's a surface of the planet that if you can escape these inward dynamics, oh, by the way, this either gets you stuck in Tartarus or you eventually come back out into the Arcasian marshlands, which causes your reincarnation into a physical world. Monkey, donkey, bee, whatever, maybe a human if you're lucky. And then you come back and forth. But even that, you could say, is a kind of back and forth of opposites. So it could be the physical, but we want to see how this whole story, well, not the particulars, but what is the nature of being itself. Because Socrates says you want to get out of that. That's a prison. Just like our ignorance is a chains. Because there is a beautiful habitation where you will forever be without a body on the surface of the earth, the true earth. And even there are even more beautiful places that you can go to. So this is the other journey. So if the earth is the third dimension, our soul is the fourth out of the body. If it goes to this true earth, that's the fifth. Well, it looks like the surface of the true earth. So there's the underworld, but there's a surface. That would be the sixth, where you can stay there. But then even there's a seventh dimension where these people even want to go. So we want to understand that surface, the realm of being. Just as we don't want to do a dialectic on physical beautiful things or physical just things, we want to do a dialectic on the ousia, what is beauty itself. And you're not going to get them by looking at beautiful things. You can start your curiosity, you can wonder, hang on a second, if there are beautiful things, there must be a cause. Now you're in philosophy. What do? Get into the text. Now we need to get into the text. Because you're not in philosophy yet, you've got an interest in it, but you start with learning. What's learning? Repeating the doctrine of the text. He's giving you the actual terms of the logos. But you can't just trust it. That's not good. I mean, it's a start. You have to go from learning to actual philosophy. What's that? This. Take the terms from our text in our careful reading without interpretation, without adding what we're carrying that's false in, or missing out key things because we don't see it or it doesn't conform with our beliefs. That gives us the material to do true philosophy, which is probably called philodianoia, really. Talked about the reasons for that, because if philosophy is the love of wisdom, and wisdom is the virtue of the higher part of our soul, what about the other parts of the soul? And by the way, if it's the correct activity of the higher part, what's the activity? If wisdom is the virtue of the soul, as of the reasoning part of the soul, just as courage is the middle part of our soul, our outwardly seeking, and temperance or sound-mindedness is the virtue of our desire, they all have to be harmonized, so they all seek the same thing. What's the same thing they all seek? Dianoia. So really, true philosophy, he is giving us what we need to ask that question and come up with the answer. Puzzle. What's true philosophy? Philodainoia. All right, fine. How do you do it? Oh, you most accurately understand the self of all of the self-ousias. So your attention isn't on the physical world anymore, which is good, because that's the purification element, separating from your physical senses, not interested in fashion, not interested in physical pleasures and desires, interested in the cause, that which is eternal. This ain't gonna last. You can't take your Bugattis and your fancy coats with you to the realm of being in your next incarnation. Okay, so that's what it is. Hang on a second. Well, how do you do it? How do you have the dianoia of this? Another question. Term used once in the text. Dialectic. Practice this. Always. Which also means for us when we read. Which section was the definition of philosophy? Which section was a demonstration? Which section was a division? And how do we synthesize and analyze it? Specifically, understand how it relates to our soul and our physical reincarnations. How does it relate to the true level of being or the sixth dimension? People who aren't trapped going back to the underworld, but to the true surface, escaping the rewards and punishments. You won't need rewards and punishments if you know what you're here to do. So do it. Do it. Otherwise, you'll be stuck in your fate, your chains, or you'll be imprisoned back and forth in your reincarnation. All right, so what do? Use that. What he is describing is our back and forth of reincarnation to analogously, metaphorically, let the particulars fall away and the meaning rise to the surface. Understand being. Why? Because this is a description of what we're not doing when we're not doing our purpose. When we're not doing, when we have vice, when we're not doing the virtues, when we're not loving learning, when we're not loving dianoia, when we are missing the freaking mark. So why the heck are we going to learn about, oh, okay, so I'm going to go to the Arakacian fields. Oh, if I'm really bad, I'll go down the Peri-Phagithan River into Tartarus and I'll have to climb back up there and convince. Who cares? This is what's being described as when you are ignorant of your purpose. That there is a purpose, number one, listening to the con artists who claim to be philosophers, claim to be wise and understanding, that there is no purpose. Reality doesn't have purpose. Or it's not understandable, number two. Or that there's no art of it, number three. Or number four, you can't know it. No. This is what they claim. But hey, we're not in that boat anymore. So who cares about the back and forth of reincarnation? Why would we care? You're gonna go with everyone else to the Arakacian fields? You're gonna live an unjust life and do bad things and go with those people who go down the Peri-Phrygian River or the Cocytus River from Styx and go suffer in Tartarus for some time, then swim upstream and call out, hey, sorry I was so bad to you. Can you let me back into the Arakacian field so I can reincarnate and be a person again? And go through it all over again. Boo. Why would we care? We are not in that group anymore. Whatever it was that brought you to this section of this podcast, close to 70 episodes in, you're not in that group. You are not ignorant of the fact that there is a reality. You are not ignorant of the fact that it is understandable. And you are not ignorant of the fact that you have the ability to do both and gain the art. You are aware that that is true. And you've got reasons for trusting these three things are true. Well, four if you... So if you've got the logos, reality, and self, as well as the art of all of them, you could say four. And the four things, you've understood that these are the four things that are rejected by the anti-logos people, the haters, the shooting everything down and strut around like they're smart. Like playing chess with a pigeon, knock all the pieces over and shit on the board and strut around like they've won. You understand why you would think that's the case from these people, and also from the fact that we've only had Socrates' text for the last 5 years. So there are historical reasons why there ain't people talking about it yet. Hopefully soon. So you know why it doesn't exist and that it does exist. And you have reason to trust it. And you know how to go from trust to understanding. And by the way, people who say stay at trust, they are the con artists. Someone who says, like if you go to if you're an apprentice mechanic and he says, and you ask him, can you explain why necessarily the gasket has to go on the carburetor? I don't know cars. Oh, just trust me. Have faith. What? You would leave that guy instantly. He's conning you. He's going to keep you under his thumb because you don't learn. You're not understanding. It's bollocks. So anyone who says stay at the level of trust but don't go to the level of understanding is wrong. By definition, not because I don't like the guy or he's not wearing the same right color clothes of my team or the right color skin or any of that crap. That's all physical. But because he can't access being, and dianoia is our access to being, and just logically we know necessarily a good teacher will encourage understanding. So we've got reason for trusting that this is the case, and what isn't the case isn't the case. Third, not only is Socrates giving you reasons to trust what is, and that you should repeat it, and instructing you to develop understanding, he is giving you the method. This is how we do it. And if it's the same method for purifying and perfecting, if it's the best Usia we can do, if it's also what we end up doing in the sixth dimension, if we can escape the cycles of reincarnation and go to the true surface of the true earth, then it's what we can do at all times. It's what we can enjoy. It's what we can enjoy with that part of our soul. It's what we can seek with that part of our soul. It's what we can use in our thinking. Those are the virtues. Do it as all time for the fourth virtue of justice. So in other words, we can singularly hone our focus, which is needed for contemplation, but also for harmony of our soul. Harmonized soul. But also, he's not just saying, giving us reasons to trust, not just instructing us to do understanding, not just giving us the instructions of how to do understanding. He's saying you also need to prove it. You can stick your head above water. It is verifiable in your own direct experience. That's why many are the staff bearers, but this is the one true spiritual tradition. How can we say that? Gasp. Is there a gasp?
Wow.
Do I have another sound drop? There you go. But didn't these people who say there isn't an understanding say anything goes and anybody can call themselves spiritual? Because unlike medicine, where there is an actual understanding, there is actual a reality for what's healthy body. And there are people who can develop it as an art. But don't they tell us that that only applies to certain things like medicine or flying a plane or architecture or everything except for spirituality? Because surely reality or the soul or the realm of being is the one thing that doesn't apply. Yes, that's what they say. Socrates told us they would say it, and told us why they would say it, and why it's necessarily so that they would say it, and gave us a structure for understanding the principle for why they say it. But also, he's given us what is, why that's not true, why we should trust it's not true, why we can understand it's not true, how we can understand it's not true, and how we can prove for ourselves by taking the art of the dialectic, the art of the logos, into that experience of being when it's our destiny to do so, when the divine self calls us up in this life or at the end, and prove it. Not just that, it's kind of a learning needed to go beyond that to somewhere else. That Socrates saying he doesn't have time to talk about right now, from the 6th to the 7th. In other words, because of all of that I just said and we've just reviewed, this is a kind of synthesis and analysis. Because of all of this review of where we are in the text, you listening to this have been told. We've gone through it, so good for you. Therefore, this description of the back and forth from... Where's a picture of this one? So all of these descriptions of... These are all parts of the true Earth, of the back and forth from there to our physical world. There's Tartarus, there's the Archeon River and Oceanus, and there's Periphlegython, and where's our Cocytus? Here we go. We didn't do Cocytus. Yeah, Cocytus is the other direction. Here we go, Cocytus whaling. So all this... Where are we? Because of all this, the back and forth from our physical world through the true Earth and the journeys within do not apply to you anymore. Why? Well, the best place you can go is the Arcusian marshlands. How do you pronounce this? What's that river called? Tartarus goes all the way through Acheron, the Acheron River. That's where everyone goes. The majority of people go then the Acheron River to the marshlands of the Arcusian marshlands. The Acheron River, most people. But you're not most people. Why would you want to be most people? Literally, CB said in the last argument he was in, oh yeah, I've understood through the dialectic why the soul must be immortal, but I will trust that it's also indestructible because that's what everybody thinks. He is still with the many. Simmias says, well, I have a low opinion of human frailty, so I don't care what the people think. So we have been given a demonstration of two divisions, someone like Cebes and someone like Simmias. Cebes, he's familiar enough with Socrates' teachings. He was the one who could even give a definition of the dialectic that learning is remembering, because he is familiar with Socrates. He gave 4 steps. It was very well ordered. We give him a good marks. We gave him an A. Simmias said, oh, I'm not as familiar as you are, Cebes. Can you demonstrate your understanding in the use of the dialectic to help me artfully? He couldn't do it. This is the same guy who's happy to stay at the level of trust at the end of Socrates' life. What the heck is he doing? This is a division and a demonstration. He would be with the many, wouldn't he? He hasn't lived a terrible life, so he's not going through Cocytus or Periphlegython down to Tartarus. He's going to go through, maybe he's even going to get honored because of he's going to receive some honors for the good work in doing the first stage of trust of Socrates, which is kind of rare. He was one of, 14 people? 13 including Socrates. So not a lot of people hanging around with Socrates at the end. So yeah, give him some rewards. But now he's going to come back, forget it all. Maybe nurture his soul and maybe not going to run into a Socrates character. Maybe he's reincarnating 10 years before now. So he doesn't have this podcast, doesn't have this Balboa text, doesn't have the internet medium to connect with other people around the world, to find fellow travelers and adventurers.
You're a wizard, Harry.
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
So he'll fail, maybe, and have to go through it all again. Wait till he gets lucky and runs into another Socrates and actually does it this time. Goes beyond just trust and can learn the dialectic properly. In any regard, if you're at this level of this podcast, you are unlike him. You have heard about this. So you're not like the many. What do? They're going to go back and forth. Maybe they get lucky. The really bad people can persuade others to let them back into the cycle, and they repeat it over and over and over and over. Just like people in everyday life repeat their problems over and over and over. Until what? Until they do their life's purpose, or discover that there is a life's purpose in reality, and they can know it, and it is understandable, and all three can be put together as an art. Literally, if you're watching this, you have that. You've been told, you've been shown it, given it. Come on, man.
I don't want to eat a monkey.
Don't eat a monkey and get stuck in the cycle of reincarnation and do philosophy.
Come on, man.
Come on, man.
Come on, man.
What does that mean? Well, this doesn't apply to us. We're not these people who are going to go, like, you want to, that's where Arcusian field is. Okay, great. You want to know about the Arcusian field so you can go back and maybe fall down one of those terrible rivers full of boiling mud and water or lava? Why? As soon as you realize that it's a prison and there's an actual habitation, you wouldn't care about that. So why the heck are we reading it? Why is Socrates going into such detail about these rivers and the fire and the nature of them, and then saying, oh, by the way, that's like a prison. There's actually a so there you can become liberated from the inner regions of the true earth as if from prisons. And then if you arrive above at the pure habitation, you can make your home upon the earth. And you've purified yourselves sufficiently through philosophy. Purified sufficiently. Philosophy. That's the dialectic. And then you can, from that time, live altogether without a body. And then, even then, you can go to even more beautiful habitations. But that's not an easy task to describe. I'm not going to get into that. Just like when I talked about my second search for causes, I mentioned that there's even a cause for causes, but I'm not going to get into that. So his second search for causes brought him to the level of mind. Which made him different from the many. So the people, like there wasn't no one else doing this. So they're stuck in that cycle, prison of reincarnation. But he also, they were not able to discern, on the one hand, why a cause is one thing, but that without which a cause would not be a cause is another. There's a cause for causes. Bottom of page 69. Top of page 70. Just like he just said, even when you can escape the prison of reincarnation, there's another... There's another thing, but I'm not going to talk about that either. So he's giving us some work to do. Why? Because this is meaningless to us. Because for whatever reason, you've learnt this, you've heard this, you have seen this. You have what you need to go beyond just risking the belief to developing your own understanding, which itself is a doorway to experiencing or verifying it. You ain't in this trap anymore, because you're going to go around until we find out that we have a purpose. And then we do it. I mean, you can not do it, but why would you want to not do it now that you've heard about it? You've got lucky enough to hear about it. Therefore, if Socrates is doing this for us, if he is telling us this, if he is communicating to us through time, why the heck is he talking about in such detail the inner regions of the earth that won't mean anything to us? Oh, really? Arcasian fields. Oh, river Cocytus. Wow. Who cares? We don't want to get there. He specifically said if you purify yourself through sufficiently, dialectic, doing philosophy in the right way, dialectic, go to the real world. Escape the cycles of reincarnation. Escape that prison. Yeah, no joke. If we've read this far, we've kind of figured that out, kind of. Well, if we've been doing our best to follow along, match Socrates. So why is he talking about it? That is a question. Why the heck is he talking about something that doesn't apply to us anymore? And that's question one. Question two is, what the heck is this even more beautiful place that we're calling the seventh dimension? What is this cause of even the causes? If there is a realm of being necessarily to cause our physical world, we talked about dialectics today, ousia, the fact that we can do this, motion, the fact that we have a soul that can move us, and the further we escape our fate, the chains of fate, by doing the dialectic to our problems, the more freedom we have, the more self-motion we have. Well, if there's a kind of self-motion and ousia in the physical world, that has to have a cause in motion itself, in being, self-ousia in being. But hang on, that's two things that have qualities. What's the cause of qualities? What's the cause of the many causes? He said these people, these others who are going to be stuck in cycles of reincarnation, like the teachers in his world. What was the actual expression? It was page 69, wasn't it? Yeah. They were not able to discern. They were not able to figure out the people, the everyday people, the many, the hoi polloi, the majority stuck in the cycles of reincarnation didn't realize that, hey, even a couple of them realized there have to be a realm of being, but even few of them realize that there was a realm of being, this true earth, and have asked the question about the cause of it. So we can ask the question, well, what would make the Socrates different? Or another question, how do we get out of this prison, cycle of reincarnation? Well, we would have had to have experienced this realm of being with something in our back pocket that will allow us to ask a question about it. A kind of understanding, a kind of practice, a kind of habit of looking for causes. If we experience the realm of being with a habit and practice and method or art or state of self of asking for questions about causes, then if we become of the few that can experience the realm of being, then we will be able to discern or ask the questions that can lead us to wondering, what is the cause of even that? This is the thing that Socrates didn't talk about earlier, that he said that's one reason why they missed the mark. This is the thing he's not talking about now in the realm of being. So now we've got two questions. Number one, how can we understand the cycle, all of the divisions in the description of the true earth, or the higher or true earth, and all of its passage and stuff? How can we use that metaphorically to understand the nature of being itself, and as a paradigm to understand our soul, so we can make ourselves the same as being, or pure so we can be with the pure, or self according to self through likeness or sameness? So that's our first thing. How can we use this? Because we're not interested in reincarnation, as we've been saying. Not someone watching this. Of course, we don't want to come back, navigate how to get stuck in a pattern or a prison. We don't want to do that. We want to escape the prison, or go to the true habitation, or what we're calling the sixth dimension. So we hypothesized this earlier by saying, well, Socrates in the text, he calls it, he talks about separating the soul from the body. Let's call that the fourth dimension because it's not physical. But then he did talk about reincarnating as a bee and stuff. And so there must be and as a daemon guides us to this other place. So that's different than the soul, because our soul's in there. So let's call that the fifth dimension. But he's also been talking about doing our proper life's work and completing our work here. And the whole text has been about what we need to do our proper life's work and complete our work here. That's the art of the logos, dianoia, the dialectic, and integrating it into phronesis. And by the way, that's our education and nurture we can take with us. So we're not taking it with us here, we're taking it with us somewhere else, where we meet better humans and gods who've completed their work. So if they've completed it, they're somewhere else other than the soul, fourth dimension, reincarnation place, fifth dimension. They must be, we'll call it the sixth. But if they're travelers and guides, they must be going somewhere. So we hypothesized that there's a seventh. This is a hypothesis that we take with us. This is part of reading. Pull it together. If we're doing the dialectic, you can come up with questions and hypothesis. Body not as real as soul is to being. Right. Body is the soul is to being. So that was our hypothesis. And what do you know? Taking a hypothesis with us in our quest, or taking a question with us, puts us on a quest, allowed us to recognize, oh, hang on a second. Here Socrates is talking about escaping from the prison of the inner regions of the true earth that our soul goes to, but there being a more beautiful habitation that we can stay there eternally without a body. Hang on a second. That sounds like the sixth dimension, what we called the sixth dimension earlier, as a hypothesis, a question. Wow, our questions help us to see. So the soul, yeah, we can keep that as being the fourth. The inner regions we can call the fifth. But then he said, oh, but by the way, there's an even better place I'm not going to talk about. That's the seventh. It panned out. So good for us.
Wow.
The hypothesis we took with us panned out nicely and helped us to see. So we got two levels of questions, right? How do we make sense of this? Because it's got to make sense. It's just gotta. Why? Definition, demonstration. This is a kind of division into all of these different rivers and places and stuff that has absolutely no meaning to us. He's describing what others do, the many do, and the really, really terrible people. If you're into philosophy, you're probably not a terrible person. You're probably doing your best to practice virtue. And if you're in this game, you're not one of the many. So he's done this huge division that has no application. What is he, senile? He lived such an intelligent life right up to his last moment, and then he went mental, went crazy. Course not. Course not. I don't know what that means. So, there has to be a reason for it. In other words, use the dialectic. How can we see the dialectic? If Socrates is able to define it, able to demonstrate the dialectic, able to divide it up, he has it. It's in his way of being. He's functioning through the dialectic. That's what it means to have an art. Once you have the art of medicine, you see through it. Once you can speak English, you see through English. You don't have to think about it anymore. Everything you say will be in English. Equally so, if this is the art we're here to do, and Socrates is confident he's completed his purpose, then he's functioning through it, which means his whole way of being is through it. Not only that, we've heard that he has a certain state of self called phronesis, which is an integration of that art, where he can even judge that the things that he says are going to maintain that state of phronesis ousia or not. Right, exactly. Like anything you have a mastery over, you'll just see it obviously and you'll function through it. Like a guitar, you want to have a certain mastery of it so that you don't have to think about what you're doing, you just speak that way. Now, if that is the case, then we should see the whole dialectic in everything, which means we can look at what section we are with this weird, completely inappropriate, not fitting at all description of what the others will go through in their reincarnation. Has no application to us. It better have an application to us. It's probably the division stage. Why? He's probably, again, these are hypotheses, probably functioning automatically in this whole dialectical way, which means we have some work to do. He wouldn't be a good teacher if he was just defining it for us or just demonstrating it so we can imitate like Seebees. He has to break it down into division so we can recognize right after showing us a difference between Seebees and Simmias. Seebees fell down, Simmias was interested, but he didn't finish it. He didn't finish describing the art of the logos. He didn't finish, he didn't get into the dialectic, demonstrate the dialectic of why the soul was indestructible. He didn't even finish his search for causes. And he didn't, because Simmias was like, oh, I'm not happy with just trusting that the soul's indestructible. He didn't finish. Of course he didn't finish. He would be a rubbish teacher if he did. Why? Because he's not just demonstrating it, he has to divide it up, give us the pieces. It'd be a rubbish video game if all of the questions were solved. It's got to be divided up. He needs us to finish it. We need to complete a dialectic on why the soul has to be indestructible. We have to finish Socrates' second search for causes. We have to master the art of the logos. So we have to, therefore, to do that, if the art of the logos is around the art of the dialect, well, the doing of the dialectic, which state, we have to apply this to the text. Which stage are we in? Division. Okay. Then what do we have to do with that? Synthesize it in a way that we can analyze it, apply it back to our opening definition of what philosophy is. The art and practice of dying and being dead. How do we do that? Considering we know it's not literal, because it wouldn't apply to us. We have to find a way of synthesizing it that completes this. It has to be, because synthesis follows division. If you look at the dialectic, you start with an idea, soul or whatever, and then you define it. So this self becomes even more great because you've defined, you've added more to it. This enhanced definition rolls over to the next level. It flows on. This thing we've just defined more beautifully then will function towards something. This thing will be affected by that functioning. So that's made more bright. It's come to light more. And then that rolls on. And then this affects something to make this better. And that rolls on. There's a flow. It has to flow. So it can't just be a non sequitur. if he's been defining dianoia, nous, phronesis, being, truth, the art of the logos, and the necessity for us to have it and not just trust all that, it has to, this division into the explanation of reincarnation for most people has to follow on. In other words, this is what philosophy is. Art of the dialectic, art of the logos. Integrated into a state of self called phronesis. How does it demonstrate? Okay, this is how I talk to my friends. These are the 4 arguments I used to perfect and purify them with an art. By the way, I will conclude by saying you have to get the art too. You can't just trust me. Okay, so they've been affected. What do? What happens to Simius and Cebes? Well, they relate to each other in a certain way. Or they relate to their incarnation in a certain way. Or they relate to the story in a certain way. Or, more importantly, they relate to us in a certain way. They represent, so this Simius and Cebes here, having been affected by the demonstration, model for us the 2 divisions. So us, what do we do? How do we fit? How can we take this division in the text of the 2 earths and reincarnation, and how do we pull from that something relevant for us to bring it all together? Bring all what together? All of it together. So that we can return back to the definition of philosophy analysis and see it in a new light for our own. That's our task here. And we already know we've got 2 levels. We've got the causes, the second search for causes mind, and we've got the conditions or the cause of causes. Just like we've got the 6th dimension and the 7th dimension. And we know that it's not to do with the 4th and 5th. These aren't relevant to us anymore, but that's part of the game. Metaphor, analogy. You apply the dialectic to things, to dreams, to the text, to our questions, to our random thoughts and distractions and problems. So we can raise to the level of causes. That gives us a freedom. A freedom to do what? Ask the question, why is it that it's the same structure, the same dialectic we use to purify our problems as we do to perfect? As we do to understand our dreams, as we do to understand our random thoughts, as we do to understand the distractions of meditation, as we do to understand our reincarnations in our everyday life. Why is it that it's the same cause? So anybody who's gone through midwifery or dream analysis, eventually they are led to this question. If there is a cause that once I see and can purify myself from, what is the cause of this whole thing? Why is there a structure? Why do we get reincarnated only to return back to the realm of being, but with this in our back pocket? Why go through all that if we're coming back to where we started, but we're coming back with this in the back pocket, just like in the dialectic analysis, we come back where we started, but we come back with a synthesis of everything that follows. Why are we here to learn? Why do we bring with us our education, our paideia, and our nurture? So these are the 2 levels of questions. How can we understand all of that stuff about the true earth, to understand being, and to give birth to a higher question of even the cause of being? If this has a certain pattern or structure that affects this, where did this pattern and structure come from? Or in other words, what is the 7th dimension? That's our task. That's what we have to do, to be reading well and doing our work here, our proper work. And as it says in the text, this is how we let's do this one here. This is what we are to do if we are to enjoy the pleasures of learning, prepare ourselves in the proper way, adorn ourselves with the things of self, and await our allotted destiny. That's what we have to do. That's what we'll do next time on that cliffhanger and on that bombshell. Hope to see you next time. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for joining me in chat and on YouTube. Those who watch the live stream on YouTube, you can find this video and the whole series for free on YouTube. You can also find the text for free on a link below. You can also join the Discord for free, and you can join our chat in Twitch. For these are recorded live. You can join and ask questions in Twitch. That's a lot of fun. And of course, if you like it, you can support on Patreon, which is of course greatly appreciated. If you want to contribute and support this existence of this, thank you so much for joining me. We got a big task ahead of us. Yeah, it's all free. But you can support if you have the means. Free real estate, right? I've seen the meme. Yes, I like Tim and Eric. So, big task for us next time. I have no idea how we're going to do that. None whatsoever. Really puzzled, really curious, really stuck, really annoyed even at how obtuse it is and how difficult it might be to do that. But at least we have a way to go. And at least we know it's, if anything is worth doing here, it's that. So let's do our best. Let's try and participate in excellence with every effort to go through it all in detail to do that. And let's see if we can be brave and do it with good cheer. Thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you next time.